As we all know, terrorism is often associated with religious hatred, and religious buildings are in clear and present danger of attack. So how do you strike a balance between freedom to worship and also having an attractive destination for tourism and protecting the public? Chris Knight met up with Garry Evanson, chairman of the Security Institute, to get a synopsis of his presentation on the best approach to security for religious buildings, which he presented at the recent SCTX show.
I'm Chris Knight, I'm talking from SecurityExpertOnline, and I'd like to introduce you to Garry Evanson, one of our subject matter experts. Gary, hello.
Hi Chris, good to see you again.
And you too. Tomorrow you're going to be doing one of the keynote speeches here around a particularly important part of security as it stands today, that of security in public spaces and in particular around areas of worship. Could you give us a little bit of an overview in terms of your views, thoughts and the particular issues that we should be considering on that front?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, oddly enough, I had to be dragged kicking and screaming to this because it's not a subject that likes to have their views aired. But my role very much, my day job, as well as being chairman of the Security Institute, is about security in places of worship. So one of the things that became quite apparent 5 years ago when I took my present job was to look at the balance between technology and people. You'll appreciate, as I'm sure the audience will appreciate, that a church can't have lots of barriers and lots of inhibitors to people coming to worship. The aesthetic would be wrong as well as the practical bits and pieces. So very much looking at how we give assurance to people coming to worship and the visitors, if you're a place of worship that takes visitors as well, how to make them feel safe and secure without being overly inhibitive.
And what best practice can you share with us on that front?
Well, I think the best practice is very much being professional and knowing your customer service piece, but also taking the regulatory part to the back part of the brain if you're a security officer or a guard. So what we try to inculcate with our security staff is very much looking friendly, appreciating people and their needs and their concerns, and the fact they might be asked where Buckingham Palace is, but also in their head going on at the same time is that continual assessment, making sure that there is no threat to the space they're looking after, and that the people who they can see are actually not a threat to the place of worship. It's very much really assessment, having a good professional brain, good training, and knowing what to do if something does start to go wrong.
Can you give us a little bit more information around the specific training that you work with?
Well, the training is built very much on normal security training, the type of stuff you would expect, searching of bags, asking the right questions, awareness training, CCTV, all those elements you would expect. But where it perhaps differs from normal institutes and institutions where security is very much to the fore is very much about intelligence, knowing, being networked with the police and the people who can give you the background and the threat as it is in your area. Also knowing who to talk to, and again, that customer relations piece to the fore, so that you do not appear inhibitive to the individuals.
And there's an additional dynamic here in London in that we get a high proportion of international visitors. Does that produce any extra problems for you?
Occasionally it does, and one of the things that does tend to happen is on the search regimes that a lot of places of worship have installed, is you end up with knives and instruments, paint spray cans even, which you really do not want inside the church, because that there can be used as a weapon, especially if it's a blade, but also it's the lack of understanding from the people that come from abroad. And Americans actually do that quite often. But again, that customer piece comes to the fore. You talk to them nicely and they just relinquish themselves of that particular item. So we don't get censorial about it, and we do have an arrangement with the police that we can actually get rid of this stuff if we do happen to confiscate it.
So it's a mix between an open and a welcoming environment, but having the steel, if you wish, behind it to make sure that the policies.
Well, a nice pun you used there, Chris.
Work well.
Absolutely that. And it is a fine balance, and we always talk about balance and enabling security in places of worship. Never regulatory and how do we stop people. It is very much how can we assist, how can we make it happen without putting the institution at risk. And that's really the byline. And you mentioned international people and coming to visit and paying. Oddly enough, we find that they want the security. They actually are happy to see that there is a level of security that actually looks at them coming through the doors and asking them the right questions. And again, especially from the American perspective, this is ever more so because they now see that almost as a default position. And if you don't provide that security, the first thing they will say is, why? Why aren't you looking after our interests and our safety? So yes, it's actually strange enough, and maybe counterintuitively to an English person, is actually working well for us.